The day my grandfather, William Langston, died, everything changed for me, though nobody else knew it yet. I was sitting in my small apartment, the one with the creaky floorboards and the window that never shut right, when the mail came. It was just a plain envelope, but it felt heavy in my hands, like it carried more than paper. Inside was a letter from him, written in his messy handwriting that I'd always loved as a kid. "Mason," it said, "I'm gone now, but I'm leaving you everything, $50 million in assets, houses and buildings all over Europe and Asia, and big shares in companies you've probably never heard of. It's yours. But listen to this. People show their true selves when they think you have nothing. Keep it secret until the time is right." I was 27 years old, and those words hit me hard. $50 million. It didn't seem real. I folded the letter up, my hand shaking a little, and slid it into the rusty lockbox under my bed. I didn't tell a soul, not my wife, Clarissa, not her fancy mother, Evelyn, not her useless brother, Dean. Nobody. They already had me figured out anyway. Mason Clark, the guy who could barely pay the bills, the husband who dragged along behind their perfect family. I decided to let them keep thinking that. For now. Clarissa was out that day, probably at her mom's big house, the one they called their legacy. I could imagine her there, sitting with Evelyn, drinking tea from those fancy cups they loved so much. Evelyn would be going on about Dean again, how he was going to do something great one day, even though he'd never done much of anything. Me? I was the guy they rolled their eyes at, the one who drove an old car with a dented door and worked a boring job moving boxes around. They didn't know that job didn't matter anymore. They didn't know I'd just become richer than all of them put together. That night, Clarissa came home, her heels clicking on the floor as she walked in. She smelled like expensive perfume, the kind I'd never bought her. "Mason," she said, not even looking at me, "you need to pick Dean up tomorrow. He's flying back from some trip." Her voice was sharp, like I was a kid who needed orders. "Okay," I said, keeping my tone easy, like always. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't notice I'd been quiet, staring at the wall, trying to wrap my head around what I just read. She didn't care. To her, I was still the same old Mason, nothing special, nothing worth asking about. The next morning, I got into my beat-up sedan, the one Evelyn always made a face at when I pulled up to their driveway. I drove to the airport to get Dean, the engine rattling the whole way. He came out of the terminal looking like he thought he was famous, sunglasses on even though the sky was gray. "Hey," he said, tossing his bag in the back and climbing in. "Man, this car is a joke. You gotta get something better." I just smiled, my hands tied on the wheel. "Maybe someday," I said, keeping it light. He didn't say thanks for the ride. He just leaned back and started talking about how his latest big idea, some crypto thing, fell apart because nobody understood him. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my mind was on that letter. People show their true selves when they think you have nothing. Dean didn't have a clue I could have handed him $1 million right then and walked away without blinking. But I didn't. I drove him to Evelyn's house, the one I just found out was part of grandfather's estate, technically mine now, and watched him stroll up the steps like he was king of the world. He wasn't. I was. Later that night, Clarissa sat me down at our little kitchen table. The light above us buzzed like it always did, and she had her arms crossed tight. "Mom's worried about Dean," she said, like it was my job to fix it. "He needs some help getting started again. You've got that savings account, right? Maybe you could chip in." I looked at her, really looked. Her hair was perfect, her nails shiny and new, probably paid for with money I'd moved around through a company she didn't even know existed. "I've got about $2,000 saved," I said slowly, watching her face. Her eyes got bright for a second. "That's something," she said. "It's not a lot, but it could help Dean. He's got big plans." I almost laughed. Big plans? Dean couldn't plan his way out of bed most days. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice calm. She frowned, but she didn't push me. She didn't ask why I'd been acting strange, didn't wonder what was going on inside my head. To her, I was just Mason, the guy who didn't matter much. I let her think that. Grandfather's words kept running through my mind. People show their true selves when they think you have nothing. I could see it already. Clarissa, Evelyn, Dean, they didn't care about me. They never had. They only cared about what I could give them. And they thought I had nothing to give. The days after that letter felt like I was living a lie, but I wasn't ready to stop yet. I went to my job at the warehouse, pushing boxes around, acting like I still needed the paycheck. At night, I locked my door and pulled out the papers grandfather left me, list of properties, bank accounts, company shares. It was a lot to take in, but it was mine, Clarissa would come home, complaining about her family, not knowing I was sitting on a fortune that could shut them all up. "Dean's got this new idea," she said one night, flipping through some magazine. "Mom thinks it's going to be huge." I sipped my coffee and nodded. "Sounds good," I said, even though I didn't mean it. She didn't hear the little edge in my voice. She didn't know I was already starting to plan, already watching them closer than they'd ever watched me. They thought I was nothing. Soon, they'd see I was everything. But not yet. For now, I'd keep quiet, keep playing along. The letter wasn't just money, it was a map, and I was following it step by step. They'd show me who they really were. And when they did, I'd be ready. I was still getting used to the secret I carried when Clarissa hit me with her latest order. It was a Thursday morning, and she was standing in our tiny kitchen, already dressed up like she was going somewhere important. "Mason," she said, her voice clipped and bossy. "Dean's crypto thing didn't work out again, but Mom's throwing him a dinner tonight to celebrate his effort. You need to drive us to the private club. Wear that gray suit I got you last year, and please, don't say anything stupid to embarrass me." I looked up from my coffee, the mug warm in my hands, and nodded. "Sure," I said, keeping it simple. She didn't even glance at me, just kept scrolling on her phone. To her, I was the guy who followed instructions, the husband who didn't argue. She didn't know I owned that private club, or that I'd paid for Dean's effort through a company they'd never heard of. I finished my coffee slow, letting her words sink in. A dinner for Dean. For failing. And I was supposed to play along like always. I spent the day at the warehouse, moving crates and pretending my life hadn't flipped upside down. The guys there joked with me, asked if I was ever going to get a better car. I laughed it off, same as always. "One day," I said, dusting off my hands. They didn't know one day was already here. When I got home, Clarissa was waiting, tapping her foot like I was late. "Hurry up," she said, tossing me the keys to my old sedan. "Mom and Dean are ready." I pulled on the gray suit. It was tight in the shoulders, a little worn at the cuffs, but I didn't care. It was part of the act. We picked up Evelyn and Dean from their big house, the one with the stone lines out front. Evelyn climbed in, her nose wrinkling at the car. "Mason, really?" she said, brushing imaginary dust off her skirt. "This thing smells like a garage." Dean smirked from the back seat. "Yeah, bro, you're killing us with this junker." I gripped the wheel and smiled. "Sorry about that," I said, nice and calm. They didn't know the junker was a choice, not a necessity. The drive to the club was quiet except for Dean talking about his next big plan, something about digital coins again. Evelyn chimed in, saying how proud she was, how he just needed a little push to make it. Clarissa nodded along, throwing me a look like I should agree. I didn't say anything, just kept my eyes on the road. When we pulled up to the club, it was all glass and lights, the kind of place you'd see in a movie. The valet took my keys without a word, and I followed them inside. The place was packed, rich folks in suits and dresses, laughing over drinks. Evelyn waved at people she knew, acting like she owned the room. Dean strutted ahead, already ordering champagne before we even sat down. Clarissa grabbed my arm, pulling me close. "Don't mess this up," she whispered. "Just smile and stay quiet." I nodded again. "Got it," I said, and she let go, satisfied I'd behave. We sat at a big round table near the window, the city sparkling outside. The waiter brought the champagne. Expensive stuff, the kind I'd picked out when I bought this place through a shell company. Dean raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, grinning like he'd won something. Evelyn clapped her hands together. "Oh, Dean, you're so inspiring," she said. Clarissa smiled at him, then glanced at me like I was supposed to join in. I lifted my glass, took a sip, and kept my mouth shut. They didn't notice how I watched them, how I saw every little look they shared. The dinner went on like that, Evelyn bragging about Dean, Dean talking about himself, Clarissa nodding along. They ordered more drinks, appetizers, steaks, all of it piling up on a tab I knew I'd cover without them ever knowing. At one point, Evelyn leaned over to Clarissa, loud enough for me to hear. "Imagine if Mason had half of Dean's drive," she said, laughing. Dean chuckled too, slapping my shoulder. "No offense, man," he said. I smiled back. "None taken," I said, smooth as anything. They didn't see the way my jaw tightened just a little. Later, they started planning a trip to Bora Bora, some fancy vacation to recharge after Dean's latest flop. "We'll need to book the villas soon," Evelyn said, sipping her wine. "It's the best spot." Clarissa nodded. Sounds perfect. We deserve it. I sat there, cutting into my steak, listening as they went on about flights and beaches. Then Dean looked at me, smirking again. Sorry, Mason, no room for the sedan crew, he said, and they all laughed. I laughed too, just enough to keep them happy. Yeah, I'll sit this one out, I said, taking another bite. They didn't know I could have bought the whole resort they were dreaming about. They didn't know the champagne they were drinking, the club they were sitting in, the very table they leaned on. It was all mine. I'd set up the shell company months ago, after grandfather's letter, and moved money around so quiet they'd never trace it back to me. As the night wound down, they got louder, sloppier, tossing back drinks like it was nothing. I stayed sober, watching. Clarissa leaned on me at one point, her breath warm with wine. You did okay tonight, she said, like she was grading me. Thanks, I said, patting her hand. She didn't catch the edge in my voice, didn't see how I was counting every word they said. They stumbled out eventually, the valet bringing my car around. Evelyn sighed as she got in. Next time, let's take Dean's car, she said. Dean grinned. Yeah, this thing's a downgrade. I just nodded, starting the engine. Next time, I said, and let them laugh again. I dropped them off at the house, watching them disappear inside, still buzzing from their big night. I drove home alone, the road quiet, my hands steady on the wheel. They thought they'd had a great time at my expense. They didn't know I'd been the one in charge all along. That club, that dinner, it was my money, my power, and they were too blind to see it. I smiled to myself in the dark. Let them enjoy it. They wouldn't be laughing much longer. I woke up early that morning, the kind of early where the sky's still gray and the streets are empty. Clarissa was asleep, her breathing soft in the next room, oblivious to the fact I'd slipped out of bed hours ago. I didn't turn on the lights in our little apartment. I didn't need to. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and headed out, the door clicking shut behind me. My beat-up sedan coughed to life, and I drove through the city, past the warehouse where I still pretended to work, past the fancy neighborhoods where Clarissa's family lived, until I reached the tall glass building downtown. Langston Holdings. My building. I parked in the underground garage, nodded to the security guy who didn't bat an eye at my junky car, and took the elevator straight to the top. The penthouse office was quiet, all sleek wood and big windows looking out over the skyline. This was my real world now, the one nobody knew about, not Clarissa, not Evelyn, not Dean. Just me and the empire grandfather left behind. I sat down at the desk, a wide slab of oak that probably cost more than my apartment, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed, showing spreadsheets and reports, my portfolio, laid out like a map of everything I controlled. I scrolled through it, taking it all in. The mansion Evelyn called their legacy home? I'd found out weeks ago it was part of grandfather's estate, and I'd quietly taken over the mortgage. They didn't know I held the deed now. Evelyn's credit cards, the ones she flashed around like a status symbol? I'd bought up the debt through a bank I owned, consolidating it under Langston Holdings. Dean's tuition from that fancy college he dropped out of, plus all the loans he'd racked up chasing dumb ideas? Mine too. I'd paid them off and taken control, piece by piece. Nobody suspected a thing. To them, I was still the broke son-in-law, the guy who couldn't afford a decent suit. But here, in this office, I was someone else. Someone they'd never see coming. My assistant, Reza, showed up right on time, knocking once before stepping in. He was sharp, quiet, the kind of guy who didn't ask too many questions but always got the job done. Morning, Mr. Clark, he said, setting a stack of papers on the desk. Got an update for you. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under me. Go ahead, I said, folding my hands. He flipped open a folder. Dean pulled another $150,000 from their accounts yesterday. Looks like he bought a sports car, red, flashy, parked it at the mansion last night. I raised an eyebrow. $150,000? On a car. Reza nodded, his face blank. Their savings are down to almost nothing now. Between Evelyn's spending and Dean's habits, they're bleeding dry. I let out a slow breath, staring out the window. A sports car. While I was driving around in a sedan with a busted heater, Dean was burning through money he didn't even have. Money I'd end up controlling anyway. Anything else? I asked. Reza tapped the folder. Evelyn's pushing for that Bora Bora trip. She's been calling travel agents, charging deposits to one of the cards you own. I almost laughed. They were digging their hole deeper, and they didn't even know it. I turned back to the laptop, pulling up the latest numbers. Langston Holdings wasn't just a name. It was a machine, moving money and power around the world. Grandfather had built it quiet, steady, never flashing it in anyone's face. That's how he'd wanted me to run it too. I'd spent weeks after his letter learning the ropes, meeting with lawyers and bankers in secret, signing papers under fake names to keep it all hidden. Every move I made was silent, like a shadow slipping through their lives. I'd bought up their debts, their loans, their fancy lifestyle, piece by piece, until I held it all in my hands. And they still thought I was nothing. I looked at Reza. How long before they notice? He shrugged. Depends. If they keep spending like this, a month, maybe less. The bank's already sent a warning about the mansion mortgage, but Evelyn's ignoring it. I nodded, tapping my fingers on the desk. Good. Let's push it along. Start the foreclosure proceedings on the house. Nothing loud yet, just the paperwork. Reza scribbled a note. Done, he said, and headed out, leaving me alone again. I stood up and walked to the window, hands in my pockets, looking out at the city waking up below. Cars moved slow on the streets, lights flicking on in buildings. Somewhere out there, Clarissa was probably waking up too, wondering where I'd gone. She'd text me soon, asking me to run some errand for Dean or pick up something for Evelyn. She'd never guess I was here, in a suit that cost more than her car, running an empire she didn't even know existed. I thought about grandfather's letter again. People show their true selves when they think you have nothing. He'd been right. Clarissa treated me like a servant half the time. Evelyn looked down her nose at me, and Dean laughed in my face. They didn't know I'd been watching, waiting, building this quiet power right under them. That sports car Dean was so proud of? I could have bought a dozen of them and not felt it. But I didn't need to. I wasn't here to show off. I was here to take control. The sun was climbing higher now, painting the glass buildings gold. I sat back down, pulling out a file on the mansion. It was a big, sprawling place, white columns, a pool out back, the kind of house people dreamed about. Evelyn loved bragging about it, saying it had been in their family forever. It hadn't. Grandfather had picked it up years ago, and now it was mine. I ran my finger over the numbers, the mortgage payments they'd missed, the taxes they'd dodged. They were in over their heads, and I was the one holding the rope. I closed the file and leaned back, letting the silence settle around me. This was it, the moment things started moving. Foreclosure wasn't just a word. It was a hammer, and I was ready to swing it. Not because I wanted to hurt them, not really. Because they'd shown me who they were. They'd treated me like dirt, laughed at me, used me. And now I had everything they thought they owned. It was time. I picked up the phone and dialed Reza. Make sure it's filed today, I said. Yes, sir, he replied, and hung up. I set the phone down and smiled to myself. My quiet empire was awake, and they'd feel it soon enough. I was barely awake when the pounding started on my apartment door. The clock said 7:14 a.m., and the sun was just peeking through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the worn carpet. Clarissa groaned from the bedroom, pulling the blanket over her head like she could block out the noise. I rubbed my eyes, dragged myself out of the chair where I'd fallen asleep looking at Langston Holdings' papers, and shuffled to the door. I didn't even get it all the way open before Evelyn burst in, her face red and her hair wild, like she'd run straight from her fancy mansion to my rundown place. Mason, she shouted, her voice sharp enough to wake the neighbors. There's been a mistake, a terrible mistake. The bank says the house is going into foreclosure. Foreclosure? Do you even know what that means? She paced the tiny living room, her heels clicking hard on the floor. I stood there, still half asleep, watching her unravel. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice steady. It means they're taking the house because you didn't pay. She stopped pacing and stared at me, her mouth open like I'd slapped her. Clarissa stumbled out of the bedroom then, her hair a mess, wrapping a robe around herself. What's going on? She asked, blinking at her mom. Evelyn threw her hands up. The house, Clarissa. Our home. They're saying we're losing it. And I don't understand how this could happen. She turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. Mason, you've got to have something put away, don't you? Some little savings stash? We need help. This is an emergency. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, letting her words hang there for a second. Clarissa stepped closer, her voice softer, but just as pushy. Yeah, Mason, you don't contribute much anyway, but if you've got anything, now's the time. I looked at them. Evelyn, all puffed up with panic, and Clarissa, acting like I owed them something. I've got about $2,000 saved, I said, slow and calm, watching their faces. Evelyn's nose scrunched up like I'd offered her a handful of dirt. 2,000? That's it, she snapped. That won't even cover the lawyer fees. I didn't move, didn't flinch. It's what I've got, I said, shrugging a little. Evelyn huffed, turning to Clarissa like I wasn't even there. Can you believe this? After everything we've done for him, he's got $2,000 to his name. Clarissa nodded, her lips tight. Mom's right, Mason. Dean's success depends on our family looking good. We can't lose the house, it's everything. I tilted my head, letting a little edge creep into my voice. And what about me? Does my looking good ever matter to you? The room went quiet. Evelyn froze, her hands halfway to her hips. Clarissa blinked at me, like she didn't know what to say. Neither of them answered. They just stood there, staring, like I'd asked something crazy. I let the silence stretch, feeling it press against them. They didn't have a reply because they'd never thought about it. To them, I was just the guy who drove the car, paid the small bills, took their orders. My image? That didn't even cross their minds. Evelyn broke the quiet first, shaking her head. This isn't about you, Mason, she said, her tone sharp again. This is about the family, our legacy. You wouldn't understand. She turned back to Clarissa. We'll figure something out. Maybe Graham can call the bank, or Dean can talk to some of his investor friends. Clarissa nodded fast. Yeah, Dean's got connections. He'll fix this. I watched them, leaning there against the wall, my arms still crossed. They were scrambling, grasping at anything but me, even though I was the one who could have ended this whole mess right then. $2,000. That's what they thought I was worth. They didn't know I'd started the foreclosure myself, that I'd told Reza to file the papers yesterday from my office at Langston Holdings. They didn't know I owned the mortgage, the house, their whole world. And I wasn't about to tell them, not yet. Evelyn kept pacing, muttering about how unfair it all was. We've lived there for years, she said, her voice cracking. It's our home, our history. How could they do this? Clarissa sat on the couch, rubbing her temples. We just need a little time, she said, mostly to herself. Dean will come through. I stayed quiet, letting them spin their plans. Every word they said made it clearer. They didn't see me as part of their family. Not really. I was the outsider, the one they dragged along but never counted on. Evelyn stopped pacing and pointed at me. You should have saved more, she said, like it was my fault. If you'd worked harder, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. I raised an eyebrow. Worked harder, I said, keeping my tone even. I've been working, Evelyn. What's Dean been doing? She glared at me. Dean's building something. He's got vision, you wouldn't get it. Clarissa jumped in, her voice firm. Mason, don't start. This isn't about Dean, it's about us. I almost laughed, but I held it back. Us. Funny how us never included me until they needed something. I pushed off the wall, standing straight. Okay, I said. You figure it out then. Let me know how it goes. Evelyn huffed again, grabbing her purse. We will, she said, storming toward the door. Come on, Clarissa, we'll talk to your father. Clarissa hesitated, looking at me for a second like she wanted to say something. But she didn't. She just followed her mom out, the door slamming behind them. I stood there in the quiet, the apartment feeling bigger without their noise. $2,000. That's what they'd begged for, like it was a lifeline. They didn't know I could have written a check for millions and not blinked. They didn't know the house was already mine, that I'd set this all in motion to see what they'd do. And they'd done exactly what I expected, turned on me, blamed me, demanded more. I walked to the window, watching their car peel out of the parking lot. Desperate hands, empty pockets. That's what they were. And I was the one holding everything they thought they had. They'd find out soon enough, but for now, I'd let them scramble. It was only the beginning. I was sitting on the couch that evening, the TV flickering with some show I wasn't really watching, when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The apartment was quiet. Clarissa had gone back to her mom's after Evelyn's meltdown that morning, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I picked up the phone and saw Graham's name on the screen. Clarissa's dad didn't call me much, so I knew this wasn't just a check-in. I hit answer and put it to my ear. Mason, he said, his voice low and serious, like he was about to give me bad news. We need to talk. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Okay, Graham, I said, keeping it neutral. What's up? He let out a long sigh, the kind that said he'd been thinking about this all day. It's about the house. The foreclosure. We need to be realistic here. I stayed quiet, letting him go on. Realistic. That was a new one coming from him. He cleared his throat, and I could picture him sitting in his big leather chair in that mansion office, the one with the bookshelves he never touched. Look, he said. You're a good kid, Mason, but let's face it, you'll never be more than a warehouse worker. That's just how it is. Dean, though, he's got a future. He's got potential. If we lose this house, it's not just about us. It's about his chances, too. His image, his connections, they all tie back to this place. I sat up a little, my grip tightening on the phone. A warehouse worker. That's what he thought of me. Never mind that I'd been hauling boxes just to keep up the act, that I'd inherited an empire he couldn't even dream of. I kept my voice steady. I've got a degree in economics, Graham, I said, slow and clear. Paid for it myself, no help from anyone. You know that, right? There was a pause, a little huff on his end. Sure, he said, brushing it off. But you should know better than to compare yourself to Dean. He's different. He's got something special. I let that sink in, the arrogance of it hitting me like a punch. Special. Dean, the guy who'd flunked out of college, blown every dollar they gave him, and still got treated like a prince. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. So what are you saying, Graham? I asked, keeping my tone flat. He sighed again, louder this time. I'm saying we need help. Evelyn's a mess, Clarissa's worried sick, and Dean, he's counting on us to keep things together. If you've got anything at all, we could use it. This house is everything. I stared at the TV, the colors blurring together. Everything. That's what he called it. A house I owned. A life I'd been propping up without them even knowing. I told Evelyn this morning, I said, I've got $2,000 saved. That's it. He made a noise, half a laugh, half a groan. $2,000? Mason, come on. That's nothing. We're talking about millions here, millions we could lose if this falls apart. I stood up, pacing the small room, the carpet rough under my socks. Millions you could lose, I repeated, letting the words hang there. What about me, Graham? What do I get out of this? He went quiet again, and I could almost hear him frowning. What do you mean? He said finally. You're part of this family, aren't you? This is about all of us. I stopped pacing, standing by the window, looking out at the dark parking lot. Part of the family. Funny how that only came up when they needed something. Yeah, I said, my voice low. I guess I am. He didn't catch the bite in it. Good, he said, sounding relieved. So you'll help? Whatever you can scrape together, it'd mean a lot. I turned away from the window, my jaw tight. We'll settle everything in court, I said, cutting him off. That's all I've got to say. I hung up before he could argue, tossing the phone onto the couch. The room felt heavy after that, the silence pressing in around me. A family of users. That's what they were. Graham didn't call to ask how I was, didn't care that I'd worked my way through school, that I'd built something on my own before grandfather's letter even came. He called to guilt me, to squeeze whatever he could out of the guy he thought was nothing. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and drank it slow, letting the cold calm me down. They didn't know I'd already started the foreclosure, that I'd been pulling strings from my office at Langston Holdings. They didn't know I held their precious house, their debts, their whole lifestyle in my hands. To Graham, I was just the warehouse worker, the son-in-law who didn't measure up. To Dean, I was a joke. To Clarissa and Evelyn, I was a wallet they could dip into when things got tight. I set the glass down, my mind racing. Graham's voice kept echoing, Dean's got a future. Like I didn't. Like I was stuck forever in their shadow. I thought about grandfather's letter, tucked away in that lockbox. People show their true selves when they think you have nothing. Graham had shown me his tonight, arrogant, entitled, blind. He didn't see me as a person, just a tool to keep their world spinning. I walked back to the couch, sinking into it, staring at the phone. They'd all shown me who they were over the years, Clarissa with her orders, Evelyn with her sneers, Dean with his smirks, and now Graham with his pity. A family of users, every one of them. I wasn't mad, not really. I was done. Done playing their game, done pretending I didn't matter. Court was coming, and with it, the truth. They thought they could lean on me one more time. They didn't know I was about to pull the whole thing down. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Let them scramble. Let them beg. I'd see this through, and when it was over, they'd know exactly who I was. But for now, I'd wait. The call was over, and so was their hold on me. I woke up that morning with a calm I hadn't felt in years, the kind that comes when you know something big is about to happen. The bankruptcy hearing was today, and I'd been waiting for this moment since I'd told Reza to file the foreclosure papers. Clarissa had barely spoken to me since Graham's call. She'd been at her parents' house, whispering with them about how to fix things. I didn't care. I got up, showered, and pulled on a crisp black suit, not the cheap gray one Clarissa picked out, but a tailored one I'd bought after grandfather's letter, the kind that fit like it was made for me. I looked in the mirror, adjusting the tie, and saw someone new staring back. Not the warehouse guy, not the pushover son-in-law. Someone else. I grabbed my briefcase, another new thing, leather and heavy with papers, and headed out. My old sedan rattled as I drove, but I didn't mind. It'd be the last time they saw it and thought they knew me. The courthouse was a gray stone building, all straight lines and cold air. I parked a block away and walked, the briefcase swinging at my side. When I got close, I saw them, the Langstons, pulling up in Dean's Ferrari, the red paint gleaming like a show-off's prize. He climbed out, sunglasses on, acting like he wasn't about to lose everything. Evelyn stepped out next, her coat expensive but her face tight with worry. Clarissa followed, dressed in some fancy outfit, all silk and heels, pretending nothing was wrong. Graham brought up the rear, hands in his pockets, looking older than I'd ever seen him. They didn't notice me standing off to the side, watching. They marched up the steps, heads high, like they could talk their way out of this. I let them go in first, giving them a head start. I wanted to see their faces when it all came down. Inside, the courtroom smelled like wood polish and dust. It was smaller than I'd expected, with rows of benches and a high desk where the judge sat. The Langstons were already there, clustered at a table with their lawyer, a skinny guy in a cheap suit who kept shuffling papers. I slipped in quietly, taking a seat near the back, my briefcase on my lap. The room was half full, other people with their own cases, a few clerks moving around. The judge came in, a woman with gray hair and glasses, her robe swishing as she sat down. "Next case," she said, her voice flat. "Langston family bankruptcy petition." Their lawyer stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor," he started, "my clients are facing an unfortunate financial situation due to some banking errors. We're requesting a delay to sort this out." Errors. I almost smirked. They still thought this was a mistake they could fix. The judge flipped through her papers, her eyes scanning the pages. "I see significant debts here," she said, looking up. "Mortgage defaults, credit accounts, personal loans, all overdue. Who's representing the creditors?" That was my cue. I stood up, buttoning my jacket, and walked to the front. The room felt smaller as I moved, every step steady. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and loud. "Mason Clark, CEO of Langston Holdings." I set my briefcase on the creditor's table and popped it open, pulling out a stack of documents. The air went still. I heard Evelyn gasp, a sharp little sound that cut through the quiet. Clarissa's purse hit the floor with a thud, her fancy leather bag spilling lipstick and keys. Dean's voice broke the silence, loud and dumb. "What the hell?" he said, half standing before Graham yanked him back down. I didn't look at them yet. I kept my eyes on the judge, laying out the papers like I'd practiced in my head 100 times. The judge raised an eyebrow, peering at me over her glasses. "Mr. Clark," she said, "you're the creditor in this case?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Langston Holdings holds the mortgage on the property in question, as well as the majority of the family's outstanding debts, credit accounts, personal loans, educational financing. It's all here." I slid the papers toward her, keeping my hands steady. She took them, flipping through, her face unreadable. I turned then, just enough to see them. Evelyn's mouth was open, her hands clutching the table like she'd fall over without it. Clarissa stared at me, her eyes wide, like she didn't recognize the guy standing there. Dean's face was red, his fists balled up on his lap. Graham just sat there, frozen, his jaw tight. I met their eyes for a second, then turned back to the judge. "The debts are legitimate," I said. "Payments stopped months ago. We've given notices multiple times. They've ignored them." Their lawyer jumped up, his voice shaky. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mr. Clark is my client's son-in-law. There's a conflict here, surely." The judge didn't blink. "Is that true, Mr. Clark?" she asked, looking at me. "Yes," I said, calm as anything. "I'm married to Clarissa Langston. Doesn't change the facts. Langston Holdings acquired these debts legally. I've got the paperwork to prove it." I tapped the stack in front of me. She nodded, flipping another page. "And you're the CEO?" she said. "That's right," I replied. "Took over after my grandfather, William Langston, passed. It's a family business, my family." I let that hang there, feeling their eyes on my back. The lawyer stammered. But he works at a warehouse. This doesn't make sense." I didn't turn around. "I don't work at a warehouse," I said, loud enough for them to hear. "I haven't needed to for a while." The judge kept reading, her pen scratching notes. "These documents look in order," she said finally. The debts are substantial, over 5 million total. No payments recorded since last year. Mr. Langston's counsel, do you have evidence of compliance? The lawyer fumbled, digging through his papers. We're still gathering that, Your Honor, he said, sweat beading on his forehead. She set the file down. You'll need more than that. Mr. Clark, you're seeking full repayment. I shook my head. Not today, I said. Just recognition of the debts and a plan moving forward. I've got terms ready if they're willing to discuss. She nodded. We'll recess for 30 minutes. Sort this out. She banged her gavel, and the room buzzed as she left. I closed my briefcase, turned, and faced them. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I picked up my case and walked out, letting them sit in their shock. The game was up, and I'd played my hand. They'd never see me the same again. I stepped out of the courtroom into the hallway, the echo of my shoes on the tile loud in the quiet. The recess was on, 30 minutes before we'd go back in, and I knew they'd be scrambling behind me, trying to figure out what just happened. I didn't look back, didn't need to. I could feel their eyes burning into me, the weight of their shock following me out the door. I found a bench near a window, set my briefcase down, and sat, staring out at the gray sky. My hands were steady, my breathing even, but inside, something was churning. Not anger, not anymore, just a cold, clear certainty. This was it. The moment I stopped being their punching bag and started being the one in charge. I'd laid it all out in there. The debts, the ownership, the truth, and now they had to face it. No more hiding, no more pretending. I was the true owner, and they couldn't run from that anymore. The door creaked open behind me, and I heard footsteps, fast, uneven ones. I turned my head just enough to see Dean barreling toward me, his face still red, his fist clenched like he was ready to swing. How he shouted, stopping a few feet away, his voice bouncing off the walls. How the hell do you own all this? You work in a warehouse, man. This is some kind of trick. I stood up slow, brushing off my suit, keeping my eyes locked on his. No trick, I said, my voice calm but firm. That's just what I let you think. I don't work in a warehouse, Dean. I run Langston Holdings. Have for months. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But you're broke. You drive that crap car. You can't, I cut him off. I'm not broke. I never was. I just didn't flash it in your face like you do with every dime you borrow. Before he could yell again, Evelyn came rushing out, her coat flapping, tears streaking her makeup. Mason, she cried, her voice cracking. What are you doing to us? That house, our house, you can't take it. It's ours. She stopped next to Dean, grabbing his arm like she needed to hold on to something. I looked at her, at the desperation in her eyes, and felt nothing. Not pity, not guilt, just nothing. It's not yours, I said, keeping it simple. It was my grandfather's. William Langston. He left it to me, along with everything else. I've got the mortgage, the title, the proof. You stopped paying, Evelyn. That's on you. She shook her head, sobbing now. No, this can't be right. We've lived there for years. It's our legacy. I shrugged. It's mine now. Has been since he died. Clarissa came out next, slower, her heels clicking soft on the floor. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, staring at me like I was a stranger in her husband's skin. Her purse was back in her hand, clutched tight, and her fancy outfit looked out of place in the dim hallway. Why didn't you tell us? She said finally, her voice low, almost a whisper. I turned to her, meeting her eyes. Why didn't I tell you? I repeated, letting the question hang there. Because you never asked, Clarissa. Because you never leased. You decided I was nothing, a warehouse grunt, a nobody. You all did. Why would I tell you when you didn't care until you needed something? She flinched, just a little, but didn't look away. We're married, Mason, she said, like that explained everything. You should have said something. I nodded slow. Maybe. But you should have seen me. You didn't. Graham was the last one out, his steps heavy, his shoulders slumped. He stopped behind Clarissa, looking at me over her head. So this is it, huh? He said, his voice rough. You've been playing us this whole time? I shook my head. Not playing. Waiting. Watching. Grandfather taught me that. Keep it quiet. Let people show you who they are. And you did. I stepped closer, my voice steady. He left me everything, 50 million in assets, properties all over the world, shares in companies you've never heard of. I've been building it, moving it, taking over what you thought was yours. The house, the loans, the credit cards, all of it. I'm the true owner now. and you can't change that. Evelyn sobbed louder, sinking onto the bench I'd left, her hands covering her face. Dean swore under his breath, kicking at the wall. Clarissa just kept staring, her eyes wet but hard. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and held it out. Here's the breakdown, I said, handing it to Graham. Langston Holdings owns the mansion. Mortgage went unpaid for 8 months. I bought your debts, Dean's tuition, Evelyn's cards, your personal loans. It's all mine now. I let you think I was nothing because that's how you treated me. But I've got shares, investments, properties that make your legacy look like pocket change. Graham took the folder, his hands shaking as he opened it. He scanned the pages, numbers, dates, signatures, and his face went pale. This is real, he muttered. Every word, I said. Grandfather believed in humility. He didn't show off, didn't need to. I learned that from him. You didn't. Dean spun on me again. You're a liar, he shouted. You've been laughing at us behind our backs. I looked at him, cool and steady. No, I said. I've been watching you waste everything, money, chances, people. I didn't laugh. I just waited. Evelyn wailed into her hands, and Clarissa stepped forward, her voice breaking. Mason, why? Why do this now? I took a breath, feeling the weight of it all settle on me. Because you never cared until it was gone, I said. You didn't ask who I was, you decided who I wasn't. I'm not your servant, your ATM, your joke. I'm the guy who owns it all. And now you know. The hallway went quiet except for Evelyn's crying, the sound bouncing off the walls. They didn't have anything left to say, no arguments, no excuses. I picked up my briefcase and turned toward the courtroom door. See you inside, I said, walking away. They'd show me their true selves, just like grandfather predicted. And now I'd shown them mine. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I walked back into the courtroom with my head high, the briefcase swinging light in my hand now that the truth was out. The recess was almost over, and the hallway behind me still buzzed with Evelyn's sobs and Dean's muttered curses. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd said what I had to say, and now it was time to finish this. The judge was already at her desk when I stepped in, her glasses perched on her nose, flipping through the papers I'd given her earlier. The Langstons shuffled in a minute later, dragging their feet like they were walking to a funeral. Evelyn's face was blotchy, her eyes red from crying. Clarissa kept her head down, her hands tied on her purse. Dean glared at me, his jaw clenched, and Graham just looked tired, like the fight had gone out of him. They sat at their table, their lawyer whispering fast, but I could tell he didn't have much left to work with. I took my spot at the creditor's table, opened my briefcase, and pulled out a single sheet of paper, my terms. The judge banged her gavel once, sharp and loud. Order, she said, her voice cutting through the room. We're back. Mr. Clark, you mentioned terms for a resolution. Let's hear them. I stood up, smoothing my suit, and held up the paper. Yes, Your Honor, I said, keeping my tone steady. Langston Holdings isn't here to destroy anyone. I'm offering a way forward for them and for me. I glanced at the Langstons, their eyes locked on me, waiting. Here's what I propose. The mansion gets sold. It's too much for them to maintain, and the debts tied to it are drowning them. I've already bought a smaller house, a modest one, 3 bedrooms, paid off, no mortgage. They can move there, start fresh. Evelyn and Graham will attend financial counseling, mandatory, twice a month for a year. They need to learn how to live within their means. Dean's cut off. No more loans, no more handouts. He's on his own. And they'll all follow a strict budget I've set, monitored by my team. No exceptions. If they agree, I'll clear the personal debts, credit cards, loans, all of it, and call it even. The room went dead quiet. The judge leaned forward, peering at me over her glasses. That's generous, Mr. Clark, she said, her voice dry. You're waiving millions in repayment? I nodded. Yes, ma'am. I don't need the money. I need them to stop leaning on me or anyone else. This gives them a chance to stand up. She tapped her pen on the desk, looking at the Langstons. Counsel, your client's response? Their lawyer stood, his hands shaky, glancing at them like he was begging for direction. Graham whispered something to him, and he nodded. Your Honor, he said. My clients need a moment to discuss. Dean cut him off, jumping up, his chair scraping loud against the floor. This is bull, he shouted, pointing at me. He's just my brother-in-law. He can't do this. He can't control us like this. The judge banged her gavel again. Sit down, Mr. Langston, she snapped. One more outburst, and you're out. Dean dropped back into his seat, fuming, his face redder than his Ferrari. I looked at him, calm and steady. I'm not just your brother-in-law, Dean, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm your landlord, your creditor, and now your reality check. You don't have a choice here. I do. Evelyn let out a choked sob, burying her face in her hands. Clarissa stared at the table, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. Graham cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. Mason, he said, you're serious about this? Selling the house, cutting Dean off all of it. I turned to him, meeting his tired eyes. Dead serious, I said. You've been living a lie, spinning what you don't have, treating me like I'm nothing. This is your way out. Take it or don't. But if you don't, I'll collect every penny you owe me, and you'll have nothing left. He swallowed hard, looking down at the table. The judge tapped her pen again. This is a private agreement, she said. I can approve it if both sides sign. Mr. Clark, you're prepared to enforce this. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I've got the house ready, the counseling lined up, the budget drawn. It's all here. I slid the paper to her. She took it, read it over, then passed it to the Langstons' lawyer. He handed it to Graham, who stared at it like it was poison. Evelyn peeked over his shoulder, her sobs quieting into sniffles. A smaller house, she whispered, like it was the end of the world. No more club memberships, no trips, Graham. We can't live like this. Graham shushed her, his hand on her arm. We don't have a choice, Evelyn, he muttered. He's got us. Clarissa finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine. You planned this, she said, her voice flat. All of it. I didn't blink. I planned to see who you really were, I said. You showed me. Now I'm showing you. The lawyer leaned in, whispering to them again, but I could see it in their faces, they were cornered. Graham took a pen from the table, his hand shaking as he signed the paper. Evelyn hesitated, her lip trembling, then scrawled her name under his, tears dripping onto the ink. Clarissa went last, her signature slow and silent, her eyes on the floor the whole time. The lawyer took it back, passing it to the judge. She looked it over, nodded once. Agreement accepted, she said, banging her gavel. Debts cleared, terms enforced. Case closed. The sound echoed, final and heavy. I closed my briefcase, the click loud in the stillness. The Langstons didn't move, just sat there, staring at the table like they couldn't believe it was over. I stood up, smoothing my suit again. You'll get the house details tomorrow, I said, looking at them one last time. Follow the rules, and you'll be fine. Dean glared at me, his fists tight, but he didn't say a word. Evelyn clutched Graham's arm, her face buried in his shoulder. Clarissa didn't look up, just sat there, frozen. I turned and walked out, the courtroom doors swinging shut behind me. They had no idea this was the generous option. I could have taken it all, the house, the car, every cent, and left them on the street. But I didn't. I gave them a chance, more than they'd ever given me. Now it was up to them to take it. I stepped into the hallway, the air cooler out here, and let out a slow breath. It was done. They'd signed, and I was free. I woke up the next morning in a new place, a small condo I'd bought downtown, far from the cramped apartment I'd shared with Clarissa. The bed was big, the sheets crisp, and the view out the window showed a city I was finally starting to feel like I owned. Yesterday's hearing still buzzed in my head, the gavel's bang, the Langstons' stunned faces, the weight of my terms sinking into them. I got up, made coffee, and stood by the glass, watching the streets below wake up. Today was different. Today, they'd start feeling what I'd done. I'd already texted Reza last night after the hearing, telling him to move fast. By now, the wheels were turning, and the Langstons were about to see their old life slip away. I sipped my coffee, the warmth steadying me. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was justice, and I was ready to watch it play out. Reza called around 8, his voice sharp and quick. It's done, boss, he said. The Ferrari's gone, repossessed an hour ago. Tow truck pulled it right out of their driveway. Dean's losing his mind, according to the guy I sent. I smiled into my mug. Good, I said. What about the rest? Reza kept going. Used sedans parked there now, gray, nothing fancy, keys in the mailbox. Evelyn's country club called me back. Memberships canceled, effective today. They're locked out. I nodded, setting the mug down. Perfect. Keep me posted. He hung up, and I pictured it. Dean kicking the empty spot where his car used to be, Evelyn calling the club in a panic, only to hear, sorry, ma'am, on the other end. They'd signed the deal, but they didn't think I'd move this fast. They were wrong. I spent the morning unpacking boxes, settling into the condo. It was simple, wood floors, a couch, a desk by the window where I could work. No clutter, No noise from Clarissa barking orders. My phone buzzed around noon, her name on the screen. I let it ring twice before picking up. Mason, she said, her voice tight, like she was holding back tears. They took Dean's car. Mom can't get into the club. What's happening? I leaned against the desk, keeping my tone even. What's happening is what we agreed to, I said. You signed the terms. No more handouts, no more luxuries. That's the deal. She went quiet for a second, then her voice softened. Can we talk? Please. I don't know what to do. I looked out the window, the city sprawling below. You don't need to do anything, I said. Just follow the rules. That's it. She sniffed, a little sob breaking through. Mason, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I didn't say anything right away. Sorry didn't mean much when it was just about survival. Yeah, I said finally. I'll see you around. I hung up before she could push harder. That afternoon, I drove to Langston Holdings. My new car, a quiet, black thing, nothing flashy, humming smooth under me. The office was busy when I got there, Reza waiting with a stack of papers. How's sales in motion, he said, handing me a folder. Got a buyer lined up, cash offer, closing next week. The new place is ready for them. Keys delivered this morning. I flipped through the pages, nodding. Good work, I said. What about the fund? He grinned a little. Mentorship program's live, named it after your grandfather, like you wanted. First round of grants goes out tomorrow, small businesses, community stuff. You're making waves, man. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight lift a little. This was what mattered, building something real, not tearing down. The Langstons were a chapter closing. This was the one opening. By evening, I was back at the condo, the sun dipping low, painting the walls orange. I cooked dinner, steak, simple, the way I liked it, and ate alone, the quiet feeling good for once. My phone stayed silent. No more calls from Clarissa, no texts from Evelyn begging for a bailout. They were figuring it out, or at least trying to. I'd moved out of the old apartment that afternoon too, hired a crew to pack my stuff while I was at the office. Clarissa could keep the lease if she wanted. I didn't need it anymore. I finished eating, washed the plate, and sat by the window with a beer. The city lights blinked on, one by one, and I thought about grandfather. He'd wanted me to use this power, not just hold it. The mentorship fund was a start, helping people who actually deserved it, not a family who'd spit on me for years. I pictured them now, in that big mansion, packing boxes for the last time. Dean probably stomping around, mad about his car. Evelyn crying over her lost status. Clarissa may be wondering where I'd gone, why I wasn't there to fix it. They'd move into the new house soon, a plain little place, no pool, no stone lions. It'd be a shock, but it was theirs, free and clear. I kept my word, cleared their debts, gave them a fresh start. Whether they took it or threw it away was up to them. I wasn't their babysitter anymore. My phone buzzed once, Reza again. Club sent Evelyn a letter, he texted. She's banned for life, tried to sneak in. I chuckled, shaking my head. Typical. They couldn't let it go, even now. I finished my beer, the bottle cold in my hand, and stood up to stretch. This was my life now. No more pretending, no more bowing to their demands. I'd walked away from their toxicity, and it felt like breathing for the first time. The condo was mine, the company was mine, the future was mine. I'd spent years being their doormat, letting them walk over me because I didn't know my own worth. Grandfather's letter changed that. Showed me I had power, and I'd used it. Not to crush them, but to free myself. I turned off the lights, the room going dark except for the city glow outside. Tomorrow, I'd keep building more grants, more projects, more life. The Langstons were the past. I was the present, and I wasn't looking back. They'd feel the aftermath, sure. But me? I was already moving on. This was my real start, and I wasn't pretending anymore.